The PSVR1 was released in 2016 and it retailed at 350 quid. That's technically the price of a PlayStation 5. I am CouchGoop and I review single player, local co-op, split screen, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 and Game Pass games. We're going to be looking at this piece of hardware's peaks because it had quite a lot of support for a number of years and it came out with some damn good titles. This isn't one of them. A game called Lunge, and it was part of a larger package that was called VR Worlds that actually had some hidden gems on it. Some interesting stuff was going on with the machine and the VR headset. I had it running on a PlayStation 4 Pro and I could blatantly see a crisper resolution on that otherwise 720p through the headset, which was quite low for the time, but remember, 7 years ago, and this was very snap in and play. You didn't need anything else. You literally bought this box, got it home, and everything was up and running. You did have to buy those magic wands, and some games really pushed the use of two sticks within the game mechanics. We're going to look at some of those, but most had a pad alternative, which was a little bit lackluster. A lot of the games were made with dual wielding in mind, and this becomes very clear in the design of some of the shooter titles that came later on in the headset's lifespan. We're looking at this mech sci-fi smaller game within the VR worlds, Scavenger's Odyssey. It was the first time you were sort of introduced to an aiming system that used the visor. So you looked at something to be able to shoot at it. That was very cool. This one, I do remember, induced a little bit of nausea. This is also my first sort of dive into full-time VR, so to speak, on a gaming front. So I had to make a few adjustments. Some games were worse than others. This one was quite deep-endish with the nausea factor, but again, it was very exciting. It jumped around, didn't look terrible. There was a space game called Eve Valkyrie that I owned that was a lot more advanced than this that I actually can't find the damn footage of, but I did review it. It was on my channel all those years ago, and that one was very much standout compared to this. We are still on the VR Worlds 5 games. This one's called Danger Ball, and you actually moved your head around like you would playing header with a football, and it was very much an animated game. One of the more fun experiences to watch someone play, a little bit like Alleyway. You were sort of trapped in this one-way ticket of sending back this ball. It was really crazy because the whole arena felt like you were suspended in this massive auditorium. It was quite clever, and it was, again, one of the more colourful and lively hidden gems on that list. It had a zero nausea factor for me because you were stationary within the game itself. There was no whizzing around or change of massive direction. So this one's really accessible and lively and worth introducing to people who were new to this whole VR idea. It was called Ocean Descent, and this was the flagship for me on that VR Worlds disc because it just required you to sit there, and it had one hell of a jump scare in it in the form of a damn great white shark that came and smashed the cage up. It was excellent to watch someone else go through it, and it was the first time I genuinely felt the hairs on the back of my neck go up when I was interacting with these amazing visuals for the time. It looked incredible. So the cherry on the cake for that whole VR Worlds thing was the London heist section. It felt like it was a Guy Ritchie project. You were basically a bank robber, then you get caught by the police in the jewelry store and you have to shoot out through the counter. You get to steal the diamond. There's police everywhere. There's loads of sections to this, including a really intimate, horrible interrogation scene inside some garage. It's cleverly done, and it was one of the standout pieces on that whole disc. It was really what you were shown prior to purchase. It was on all the trailers, and it was the poster child for the system in its early inception. It culminates in an absolutely ridiculous action-packed scene involving you firing Uzi out of the windscreen of a moving van. You half expect Vinnie Jones to pop up. The damn thing was amazing for the time. I think Riggs Mechanized Combat League wanted to bill itself as like a Formula 1 meets Call of Duty, online full-on PvP, team matches, amazing robots, and really up-to-speed gameplay for something that was getting rolled out as a PSVR exclusive. This was from Guerrilla Games, and it was from their Cambridge studio, the people that gave us Killzone, Horizon Zero Dawn. That actual branch has now closed, and this is all sort of shut up shop. There's no re-release sequel of this on a PSVR2 or anything, but at the time this had pretty full lobbies. There was quite a lot of activities, very difficult PvP online. You had to communicate with your teammate, and you could pick out your different mech robot. That was really important. There was amazing loadout differential on what mechanized combat rig you chose to take out. So everything up till now wouldn't run on the system unless it spotted that the headset was connected. But Thumper was off VR as well as on. It was an absolutely stunning find. I enjoyed this so much. Amplitude, it's like a timed race. You're a tiny little beetle. It was like nothing I've ever played before. You were hurtling through this unbelievably good looking world, and the graphics, neons, and the music, the way it all clangs. It was a VR experience that really knocked me for 6. It also played very well without that headset. It didn't really need it to show off its amazing credentials, but once you went in there and fully embraced that world, Thumper was like nothing else you earned on that system. How about you talk about local co-op, CouchQ, before we all unsubscribe? I'm glad you asked, and it actually was quite an innovative setup. I have 2 favourites, Animal Force being one, which is what you're looking at here, and then you had the VR Playroom, which was like an Astrobot themed system we'll look at in a second. Now, with the headset, you could have technically your own screen, so that the person sitting next to you with a pad, when it came to local co-op, would be viewing the television or their screen. So you could have 2 dynamics going on, and this one was all about almost a heist setup where the other player with the pad and off VR is watching their sprite run around a system of traps, and you've got an overhead view almost like through video cameras looking down and causing all kinds of trouble for the person trying to work out the puzzle. Pretty crazy stuff. Put it over on the channel on one of my local 5 More videos. There's some different local co-op concepts. That VR headset is quite a cool addition, and the Playroom had this amazing monster game where one player, there was 5 people involved in this, could wear the headset and be a giant monster terrorizing the 4 people who were watching it all on screen, running around trying to avoid things but throwing things at the monster, which then appear as that player from a first person point of view on their screen. I know that sounds hella complicated, but it's such a good idea, and to watch it all unfold, this was one of the better party games to involve local co-op and that Playroom, and it was totally free, I think, with the headset. This was one piece of software that actually came with the purchase. This one was also pretty straight out the box. You just needed 4 pads. You didn't need the magic wands, and everything was there for you to have a 5-player amazing local co-op experience with that headset.
That is amazing.
And it's literally arrived today. So yeah, let's jump straight in, and it is quite big. Quite impressed with that, and one of the things I wanted to cover, and we'll look at the gun in more detail in a second, is that isn't a move. 7 year ago me, that, barely recognisable. This is more of a complimentary angle. I had that gun shipped over, can you believe it's why it's so scuffed? It was quite expensive, and Farpoint, which is what we're going to look at now, came with another piece of hardware exclusive to the system, and this was essentially a DualShock put into a gun template. Motion stick ball just put on the end there. It was quite rudimentary, but it did its job. A bit like my hairstyle back then. You could actually move your feet around in Farpoint, so it was the most immersive first-person sci-fi shooter available for the headset. There is another military title that I'll mention towards the end, but this one broke ground for me because the gun was independently operated against where you moved. It was basically not on rails, and that was one of the catches with a lot of shooter games for that VR headset, was that everything was locked when it came to your position, and you just went through a tracked path on a level, a little bit like Time Crisis or something like that. But no, this was full on adventuring, walking around, obstacles coming towards you, and just having a very immersive time. It's also hilarious watching someone swinging that funny massive plastic gun around. It was good, it was scary, it was one of the more louder releases that was exclusive to that system. You could not play this without the headset. So at the time I was like, wow, this is really moving forward. I even saw this advertised show in Dubai with someone with the headset and a TV next to them, and I was pretty damned impressed. We never saw a sequel.
Alert. Seismic activity detected.
Oh yes, we are going to take an arrow to the proverbial VR knee. It is Skyrim VR. Why is there a massive bit of white writing in the corner? This is taken from my comparison. Many moons ago I put this up against the remastered version of Skyrim, just to sort of show how downgraded the graphics are for the VR headset, particularly the PSVR1. Like, you needed to be shown when the VR was up. It was just blatantly obvious. This is really granular for something that looks pretty spectacular now. It's funny because I'm playing Skyrim again over on PC, high settings, because we're looking at all of this Fallout 4 business, Starfield's happening, we had the TV show, Bethesda's getting put under the microscope big time. But this spider fight, quite literally carrying underneath these massive fangs, that was a very memorable moment for me in Skyrim. I'm really glad I got to see the game in VR. This is Rez Infinite, a game that's got my second favourite soundtrack of any video game of all time. Obviously Hotline Miami #1, but this is like the 4th edition of this game. I think it came out on the 360, I definitely owned it on Xbox Live Arcade, but it was earlier as well, and now it found its home over on the PSVR1. My god, this was so natural. It was such a joy to be able to play this game I loved over on 8th gen. Seeing it through the VR headset was just the promised land for it. It must have been amazing for that original creator to get to play this in what I consider its true form. It is kind of rhythm based, it's a shooter. You sort of have to gather up your targets, release your bullets, and everything falls into rhythm when you listen to the soundtrack. Some of the tunes on this are absolutely amazing. There's a Killer Mike crescendo song at the end of all the levels. My only complaint is that it's just too short. So there's another strange coincidence here. This is Squadrons, the Star Wars game that was released both on and off VR. And this is also over on the EA app for Game Pass. And I'm looking at that again on high res on PC because I only really looked at this through the VR goggles, and it obviously again wasn't the highest graphical setting. I'm also rewatching some of the earlier Mandalorian seasons as well, because I distinctly remember some awesome Empire TIE fighter action, and holy Christ, it does deliver on that front. But back to this, after sitting on Squadrons on PC, which I literally did last night, going to the memories of this in VR, launching out of that TIE fighter underneath that ship, and just the immersive feeling of swinging around in the X-Wings, it really doesn't compare to having it on a flat screen. The shadows, the interiors of all the craft. The VR version of this game is clearly above its standard flat screen edition. Even though there's no changes to the campaign, nothing is different at all. It was just clear that the developers wanted this to be a great VR game, and my god, it is, and it is probably one of the strongest modern VR Star Wars titles. Not a massive category, I am aware.
Goodbye, Teresa.
We are nipping back to Astrobot very quickly. This one was something special. Essentially, it's a platformer where you are observing your controllable sprite from a distance. And this involves 3D levels and stages, and getting to look up, down, left, right, in alleyways, between cars to see how little Astrobot's getting on is pretty amazing. This, at the time, I remember quoting myself saying, this is like Sony's Mario Galaxy. It felt that revolutionary to be able to play a platformer from this angle. A lot of people I've had conversations with about the headset bill this as their best PSVR1 title, like full stop. They loved it, and it is huge. The bosses involve some pad moving around to pull tension on ropes. It kind of steps into the motion control both in the headset and on the pad, and again, you don't need the magic wand dongle. Wongles. I might start calling them wongles. So Resident Evil 7 had the reset button hit on it big time. Resident Evil 6 was just comedy, and I am still yet to do a feature on that game because it was the last of the split screen Resident Evils bar Revelations. Now, getting this as a VR port was mind-blowing. It was so scary. That house, the story, the family, everything was brilliantly done. And off VR, this game is still very popular. The story is quite refreshing against older Resident Evil lore, and the fact that they went to first person straight off the bat on build means that it was kind of VR in mind, I think, from get-go. It really works incredibly. The house has got loads of detail. It feels like you're on the set of a creepy horror film. I think they really took into account this system when it came to the boss fights, a lot of the puzzles, also a little bit like when you saw Jaws 3 for the first time. Just about every single shot involved trying to make those 3D glasses work. Graphically, we are seeing a little bit of resolution chug, and I'm going to put in the link or annotate the PlayStation 5 off VR review of this game because it bumps up the resolution, puts those pegged frames in, and externally that house looks awesome. This is a very pretty game off VR as well as on. Rush of Blood comes in right at the end of this list. By the way, this is kind of ranked. This is how much I enjoyed these games. I wanted to mention it because it really falls back on the dual wielding of the Wongles. You've got to have two guns going to independently operate them. It's absolutely amazing, but it is on rails. But this game should not be missed. It's so scary, so intense. One of the more intense games on the entire system. If I was having to list the perfect requirements of a video game, it would kind of go something like this. Good split screen or local co-op, brilliant single player campaign, potential online PvP and versus leaderboards, and VR free upgrade, please. We'll throw 4K and 60 frames per second in there, and let's put it in 2017. That's exactly what Wipeout Media Collection is. A goddamn perfect game. All of you know this, but not all of you may have tried that VR mode and being in the hatch, being in the cockpit, and they're all different shape depending on what manufacturer you're taking out, including the windscreen separation and the guns, how all that works. Seeing the tracks from that angle, the dips, the ups and downs, your stomach goes. Absolutely phenomenal upgrade, and to give it to us for free, it is one of the best arcade racers on the whole system and easily one of the top titles on the PSVR1. Really quick honorees, I did want to mention that Drive Club VR, which again was put in at no cost, and I was quite impressed with it. And if I ever win the YouTube lottery, the first thing I will do is go and get a PSVR2 and a copy of Gran Turismo 7. The Drive Club VR stuff was okay. I do want to mention Firewall 0 Hour, another exclusive to Sony. Unbelievably good reviewed game, never played it, and it uses that plastic gun from Farpoint. So we've gone through all that, and you're going to give us an add-on to a non-VR game that's potentially the best on the entire system. Well, it's a long shot, but that Ace Combat 7's virtual reality missions are absolutely spectacular, and I was so impressed with how much we're given separate of that main campaign. Recently reviewed Ace Combat over on the PlayStation 5, so this one again leads into how amazing the value is for that one disc having a superior VR mode on it that potentially nearly beats most of the games on this list. It is down to what the individual gamer prefers with the headset, but for me, I love the idea of the speed, the almost G-force-like turns that you experience in this game with the planes given to you, and sort of breaking that cloud and the weather, the granular water on that windscreen. Even looking down at the cockpit to see where your enemy is on that map screen, it's not something that's put on the HUD. The whole thing just works. It was a very immersive experience for me, and everybody that came around to look at the system, I would immediately put them onto this because it just makes that huge jump, and it's not complicated. It's not like a flight sim. It's almost arcade-like. You can see explosions going off left, right and center. One of the best experiences I've had with Ace Combat and that PlayStation VR1. My name was of course Couch Coop, and I hope you enjoyed that nostalgic fueled trip down memory lane on a piece of hardware that is now technically obsolete. There is actually a camera adapter that gets this working on the 5, but I'm not too sure about backwards boosts. But it's something that I'm glad I own and will always dig out for some guaranteed laughs. I will, of course, be seeing you down there. A subscription and a like would be absolutely amazing, and I think we're ready on that Prey video next.
Of course.